Hello, everybody. If you're just joining now, you're at the right place. We'll wait another half a minute before we start. Okay. It is 5:32 a.m. my side. Should we start?
I think we should. It's 1:32 p.m. my side.
Okay, well, welcome everybody, wherever you are in the world. Very happy to have you here today. Welcome to this webinar on narcissism in the workplace. I have just discovered that the word narcissism is quite a hard one to articulate at 5 a.m. Just been practicing it several times so that I don't stutter over it. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Debbie Goodman, and I am the CEO of Jackhammer Global, which is a global group of executive search and leadership coaching companies in Africa and the US. I'm located in Los Angeles. Aside from my one-day job as running the company, I also host a podcast on work and revolution. And last year, Niven Postma, my co-host today, was a guest. We speak on Work and Revolution about what's shaking up in the world of work, workplace culture, all things work-life. And Niven was my guest speaking about office politics. It was the best listened to, most downloaded episode of the first season. And I knew we needed to do a follow-up. And so here we are. In case you don't know Niven, I know many of you do, but let me do the introduction because this is often my favorite part of these discussions. So Niven is one of the foremost global experts on organizational politics, and she's author of the best-selling book, If You Don't Do Politics, Politics Will Do You, a guide to navigating office politics ethically and successfully. Guys, this book is an absolute must read. If you haven't got it yet, you really do need. Super easy, just on Kindle, but it's an absolute must read. It'll completely change your mind. It'll really change your perceptions around what office politics is and is not. She's not just a consultant and a strategist. She's had firsthand experience in the trenches, which is why you can't just find this information on ChatGPT, okay? This is coming firsthand from somebody who's got all the battle scars. I've seldom encountered somebody who has had experience in both publicly traded companies and not-for-profits and government, but Niven has done it all. She's also a contributor to Harvard Business Review. She's been awarded the Archbishop Tutu Fellowship, is currently doing her PhD, because I mean, yes, that's just what you do on the side, right? And so, okay, that's it. Welcome, Niven.
Oh, thanks, Debbie.
Okay, so let's just, Niven's in Antwerp right now. Let's just set the scene for this conversation, this session on narcissism in the workplace, which is the caveat to that, firstly, is that neither Niven nor I, despite our many credentials, trained therapist, clinician is not on the list. Neither of us are trained diagnosticians. Neither of us claim to be therapists. We're not here to make any kind of lay diagnoses on anybody, in fact. And we're also not here to help you do the lay diagnoses on people in your workplace. You need trained therapists for that. But here is what we're hoping to cover. So first of all, there are going to be no PowerPoints, no slides. It's just the two of us talking heads. That's it. But this is what we're hoping to cover today. First of all, understanding the range of toxic personalities that we encounter, the distinctions, what they are not, insights into why we are encountering this in the workplace. We're going to talk about behaviors that you can identify, behaviors that will be impacting you so that you can go, okay, that's it. I understand this. Once you can start understanding it, it really is extremely helpful and empowering. And then some strategies on what to do about it. We'll have some Q&A at the end. You can use the Q&A button on your laptop or desktop or whatever it is to post a question, and I'll field those towards the end. And then we'll also be sharing some resources. Okay, so that's what we're hoping to cover in the next 55 minutes or so. Please stay all the way to the end if you can. For those of you who are here and need to dash out early, we will be sending a recording to everybody. But let's kick this off. Before we actually start, we're going to do a quick poll if we can get this to work. So, all right, there we go. Excellent. So here are the poll questions. Number one, so first of all, the question is, what prompted you to join us? I have been directly impacted by a toxic workplace or manager. I'm here to learn more about narcissism or toxic culture. And then we threw in the last question, although we didn't really expect anybody would answer this one. I think I might be a toxic manager or peer. So let's see if everybody can just quickly punch in a number on that. Okay. Right. So it seems that because the numbers don't add up, it seems that some are both directly impacted by a toxic workplace or manager, but also here to learn more. We've got about an even 61, 56%, but 56% of 57% of people here have been directly impacted by a toxic workplace manager or peer. Okay, I'm gonna end this poll. Oh goodness, somebody actually said that they might be. Well done for you for acknowledging that you think you may have some challenging tendencies. Okay. All right, I'm gonna share the results with everybody. Okay, Niven, I think we're ready to kick this baby off. What are we talking about? Over to you. What are we talking about when we talk about toxic people, narcissism at work?
Yeah, so let's start at the beginning. Toxic is a blanket term, and we need to understand it very carefully. In fact, I was running a strategy session for a company group the other day, and one of the senior managers was using the word toxic quite liberally, quite freely. Now, I said to her, look, I don't know enough about you guys as a group, but when we use the word toxic, we need to be very particular about what we're talking about. So what we're not talking about is people who you don't particularly enjoy, you don't find their jokes funny, you don't find their company stimulating. Toxic is a level of abuse, a level of dysfunction that is on a whole different order of magnitude. And so, you know, Debbie, I mean, toxic is a synonym for poison. Something that's poisonous is designed to or going to kill you, debilitate you. That's what toxic environments, toxic people do. And you know, the stories that I've heard have really been heartbreaking over the course of the work that I do. And so I think both you and I had this kind of bittersweet feeling about this webinar. Gosh, I'm so glad we can address it. But isn't it poignant? Isn't it tragic that so many people are grappling with this? So when you're grappling with toxicity, like I said, it's not just your common or garden dysfunction. We're talking about sustained abuse. And the things that people talk about when they are in a toxic environment is it undermines your competence, your sense of competence. It certainly undermines your sense of confidence of yourself. And when I was talking about it in a workshop a while ago, a woman recounted her own experience of a toxic environment. And then she laughed kind of nervously at the end. She said, well, you know, I think I might be suffering from PTSD. And I did not laugh. I said to her, I think you might well be. The sustained effects of exposure to this kind of abuse are not to be dismissed, are not to be taken lightly, and they're also not to be underestimated. I read a report the other day that said when you have been in an abusive situation, you can estimate the damage, the PTSD, to whatever degree it manifests. You can estimate it to have an impact, the PTSD, of between 2 and 5 times the length of time that you were exposed to that trauma. And I mean, this is just an average. But if you're
Yeah.
in a toxic environment for a year, you can sometimes have between 2 and 5 years of PTSD. So that's what we're talking about. It's an order of magnitude level of dysfunction that is incredibly serious.
100%. I mean, one of the reasons why I wanted to address this topic is because over the years, I have interviewed very high-level executives who come and have conversations with me about their next career move, having exited an environment where you can actually see the scars and the wounds that they carry with them. They're seriously traumatized. And the way that they're living and the way they're approaching the world, and oftentimes because it's so unrecognized, because it's not spoken about, you can talk to people about the trauma of a violent incident, a robbery, a hijacking, a death, all the things that are recognized in life as real traumas. This is another real trauma, but it's so not spoken about. It's so subtle. It's not overt. It's so covert. And particularly, I have to genderize this a little bit, but particularly, I've spoken to so many male executives who don't get the recognition or support or acknowledgement. They don't reach out. They don't even talk about it. Finally get to sit with me and have a conversation about a really, really challenging exit, where you can literally see that they are emotionally scarred. Now, this is across the board. This is not, we know that this is happening to everybody. Talk about, you mentioned this previously, the dark triad. I'm interested in what it refers to.
So it's a term that was coined about 20 years ago, that we're really grappling with in our PhD, which is, and mine is on organizational behavior. So it was a term coined, like I said, about 20 years ago, and it refers to 3 traits that have a degree of commonality, but which are quite distinct as well. So it's narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy. And what's common between them is the degree of dishonesty, and the degree of misrepresentation, i.e. dishonesty around this, and the degree of lack of humility is pretty common across them. But they're quite distinct things, So just as much as toxic has become this blanket phrase for things that might just not be that great, a narcissist is someone who, based on the myth of narcissists, is someone who's obsessed with themselves. And, I think there's a lot of questions in society today with the rise of selfies, with the rise of social media, the degree to which narcissism is on the rise generally in the world. Me, myself, I, But a narcissist takes this to a completely different level of self-absorption and particularly self-promotion. So we all have narcissistic tendencies.
Right.
When you are clinically diagnosed as a narcissist, though, it starts to veer into dysfunction. A psychopath, if we're not talking about criminal psychopaths, which are also a breed apart, but functional psychopaths, well, these are people who really just don't have empathy and remorse. They don't have a connection with other people and the impact of what they do. They're completely clinically detached from the impact of their actions, of their thoughts, of their behavior. And then Machiavellianism, again, you can be diagnosed as a high Mac, but Machiavellianism is named after the book Machiavelli in the 16th century, and it was an advice to a prince in Florence, a very tumultuous time in history, about how do you lead, how do you hold on to power. And so Machiavellianism and being Machiavellian is hardly seen as a compliment, but actually there's interesting research now that says, actually Machiavelli was just being a pragmatist. Because people who are, who don't have a conscience, who don't have remorse around what they do, well, they didn't need his advice. It's good people caught in very difficult situations that are very complex who needed his advice around how to outwit, how to outmaneuver, how to hold onto power in the face of people who are trying to undermine you. And so these 3 things are very distinct. And the paper that I read a while ago said, and I mean, the statistics might vary, but this paper was saying that in terms of prevalence in society, narcissists are the most common, but they're also potentially the most innocuous. Psychopaths are the least common, And then Machiavellianism is somewhere in between. High Macs are somewhere in between.
The way you're describing it, it does sound that they're distinct, but also very nuanced and also quite difficult to determine. I mean, psychopaths, I've just done a reread of Snakes in Suits, which is for everybody who's here. I will refer to it again towards the end, but that's kind of like the seminal work on psychopathy, particularly in the workplace. And one of the ways that it is identifiable is because it sometimes does verge on criminal behavior, fraud, etc. But that's rare. I mean, if you think about it, if you think about people that we're referring to as toxic, the label, he's a freaking psychopath or she's a freaking, I mean, that's usually not the case. It's a very, very small number of people.
Yes.
How do these behaviors actually show up? Because there are so many people here, and we'll try and do the poll again towards the end, but like 60% of people here feel that they have been directly impacted by a narcissistic, somebody who they think is narcissistic, or some toxic leader. How do they know that it's that versus somebody who's just a jerk, or somebody who's just a bad communicator, or doesn't like you?
Yeah. So, I mean, that's an important question, because you do need to distinguish between these, because your coping mechanisms and the degree of severity of these are very different.
Right.
So I think I was sharing with a group this morning that in my experience, and this anecdata, I mean, I haven't got any hard evidence on this, but it does seem to be that the degree of toxicity in organizations is increasing, or that people are recognizing it and talking about it more. And, I can have some guess as to why that might be, but it is a guess. And it's premised on some training I got when I was a police reservist, so volunteer in the police service in South Africa. And we got training on domestic abuse. And there's a very clear correlation between the state of an economy and domestic abuse. So as an economy starts to nosedive, domestic abuse incidents go up. And I mean, there's all kinds of reasons for that, but one of them is the term displaced aggression. When we are feeling out of control, when we're feeling scared, when we are feeling like everything around us is shaky and uncertain, sometimes people will take that out on other people. And rather than dealing with that uncertainty, they displace their uncertainty, they displace their aggression onto other people. They turn into bullies. They turn into overbearing, over-controlling bosses. They turn the place that they're in into something toxic. Now, sometimes that's got nothing to do with anything. Sometimes it's just the way you're wired, and you're going to show that up no matter the circumstances, no matter the environment. But I do think there's a thing to be questioned here around, in a world of increasing complexity, increasing uncertainty, all manner of challenges, be they societal, economic, political, that continue. How we show up, how we deal with it can vary between us. And so, like I say, I am certainly seeing increasing incidents and reports and discussions of toxicity. And toxicity is sustained. It's sustained abuse. It's sustained diminishment of me as a person, of me as a professional, of my competence, of my character. It just chips away at your sense of yourself. And so I had someone asked me a question after I gave a keynote a while ago, and she said, look, I hear what you're saying about how damaging this is and the toll that it will take, but actually I can't do anything other than endure it because I'm the primary breadwinner at home. To which I responded, I said, I think you need to reframe this, because actually precisely because you are the primary breadwinner, you cannot afford not to work. Your family is relying on you. I get that. And in a toxic environment with the sustained abuse that you're going through, I have to warn you very strongly from the bottom of my heart that it's probably going to get to a point where you can't work because of this erosion of competence and confidence. And so actually you need to work, that I understand. And precisely because you need to work, you need to find a way to manage or get out of this environment, because it's going to chip away at your capacity to work, your sense of belief in yourself.
Okay, so the big question, we know that this type of behavior is happening all over. in companies, big and small, all over the world. Very interesting, the correlation between economic data and an increase in certain types of nefarious behavior, toxic behavior in domestic situations, and analogous in the corporate world. The big why. Why do these individuals still find their way and have a place, and they're the ones who continue to maintain their foothold and career trajectory in organizations? Why do companies, why does this continue to happen? Why is it allowed? Why is it still happening? I mean, to the outside eye, it's like, can't you see? Why aren't you doing anything about this?
Yeah. Look, I mean, that's the critical question. And I think there's a couple of answers. I mean, I think the one thing is, particularly narcissists, very good at self-promotion, which is not necessarily in and of itself a bad thing. In fact, in a lot of the work that I do with women, you know, a greater degree of self-promotion is not necessarily a bad thing for many women who are in many ways socialized to not take the credits, to give the credits to everyone else. So narcissists in particular, hell, they can talk a good talk. And they are very good at talking that good talk upwards. You know, managing impressions, creating only positive impressions about themselves. And if there's a problem, well, it's all these idiots I've got to work with. They are also often, and this is across the dark triad, I mean, people who are abusive, people who are bullies are often incredibly good at getting results. I mean, the problem is that they're getting those results over a whole bunch of dead bodies. But people don't often connect. Hold on, there's a pattern of behavior here in terms of turnover, in terms of sick leave being taken in this department. They're taking the word, they're taking at face value, the manager of the department who's talking a good talk and delivering results. And so I think there's certainly those two things, but then we're not conditioned to think the worst of people. I think most of us are conditioned to see the good in people. I mean, I remember when my sister had a restaurant and I was helping her manage it for a little while. I waitressed along with my sisters through university. I thought I'd seen all the scams that there were. There were scams happening right in front of us, but we'd bought into those waiters. We'd supported them. My sister in particular had really committed to them as people. And so all of the evidence notwithstanding, we weren't wired to see that they were lying in front of us, stealing in front of us. And so I think there's a range of things. And like I said, the loudest person often wins, and that loudest person is the more senior person who has access. So they can control the narrative. They can control the story of what's happening here. And the story is, I'm the hero trying my best, and I'm getting good results. Like I say, the casualties in the background are often less visible.
And so you're saying that people get away with it because, first of all, there's this illusion that they create around themselves that's quite entrenched in some of the higher up decision makers. So it's often their word against yours.
Yes.
And so it's, and my understanding around narcissistic style behavior is that it's much more difficult to pinpoint. They don't necessarily break any policies or rules. So I'm going to actually talk a little bit about gaslighting, because I think that this is a good segue into gaslighting. I want to do a little bit of a deep dive, because this is something that this type of behavior is actually quite identifiable if you know what to look out for. And hopefully we can talk about what these specifically are and how to try to address it internally, if possible. So once again, just to say that because you might be having a hard time at work, not happy with your boss or your peers, it could be that it's just the person's just like, they're a bit of a jerk. They just don't communicate well. They don't like you. They don't think your work's good. Maybe you are shirking a little. Maybe they've got very high standards and you kind of want to have a balanced work life. So, and as a result, there's conflict. Conflict is not the same as what we're talking about here. And I'm pretty sure you guys know this. But just to be clear, once again, that we don't want to be slapping quite stern labels, these quite intense descriptions of toxicity to people who actually are not. So that's just one thing that I want to reiterate. So here's a definition of gaslighting. It's psychological manipulation, usually over an extended period. It's not just a one and done, that hinges on creating self-doubt. It causes one to question one's own sanity or powers of reasoning, causes you to wonder whether you're the one who maybe got it wrong. And I just want to make an admission here that until a couple of years ago, I didn't really know what gaslighting was. I was actually myself in a toxic situation. But I'd become so accustomed to the way I was being treated and this kind of behavior, even though it was very hurtful. Part of the behavior is that often you are told that you're the one to blame. And so I thought that if I just said something differently or did something differently, the onus was on me to rectify the situation. And so I didn't really recognize this for what it was, although it had been going on for a while. And then one day I was doing a keynote at some women's event, and there was another presenter prior who was presenting before me, and she was talking about toxic behavior and emotional abuse. And as I was listening to her presentation, all of a sudden I was going, hold on a second, this sounds familiar. Is this? No, come on, it's not happening to me. And I was in complete denial because my self-belief about who I am in the world, I've got my shit together, I'm on things, I'm badass. This couldn't possibly be happening to me. Until I actually did a little bit more research and started to identify and realize, and then was able to admit to myself that actually I was being gaslit. And it was extremely helpful for me to have a label for the behavior. I could then notice when it was happening, and then I could start to figure out ways to address it. And so firstly, as I said before, gaslighting can be hard to pinpoint because it's quite overt. Like if you've got an abusive boss who screams and shouts and does all the stuff publicly, you can see that. That's there for everyone to see. And I'm sad to say that there are still people out there who do that. But gaslighting is much more subtle. It's very covert, it's under the radar. People are not, it's not quite as easy to say that's it. So here are some key behaviors. And hopefully if you're listening to this, and also once again, if you're like me, you're a little bit in denial or no, it's not really happening, hopefully this will be helpful and empowering to you. So gaslighters seek to manipulate and control you by making you question your reality. So they often lie. You'll be in a conversation with them and they'll say to you, no, or you'll want to address something that's come up. And they'll say, no, I didn't say that. What was your version? And then you'll say something to them and go, no, you got it wrong. You got it completely wrong. That's not what happened. They project their faults onto you. They make you constantly in defense mode. I see that we've already got something in the Q&A who's describing behavior, which is I'm constantly defending myself. I'm not doing anything wrong. But what they do is they will project whatever's going on onto you. You'll want to address something, and they will have this unbelievably sneaky, super smart way of turning around the conversation so that you feel, hold on a second, I've got to defend myself now. They also never take accountability for their own actions, and they are always finding other people to blame, usually you. And so once again, you'll be unhappy about something, you'll say something's come up, I want to address this, and somehow or another you'll find yourself apologizing to them. How on earth did that happen? And then they're crazy makers. They will go in these long have these long circuitous conversations, sow seeds of confusion. They just don't make sense, but they present with such authority that it sounds, you start actually questioning yourself. And so if any of this is landing for anybody who's here, these are some key indicators of gaslighting behavior. I'm hoping that if you've been questioning, that this gives you a little bit of, okay, that could be happening. Niven, what would you say as recommendations on if this is happening? and there's a lot of people here who believe it is, what can they actually do about it?
Yeah, but well, I'll certainly answer that. But before that, I just have to reinforce what you're saying, Debbie. And I mean, I laughed at one point, but not with any degree of humor. Because when I was in a toxic environment like that for 8 months, I mean, I had a colleague who had 3 heart attacks in 18 months working for this character. And I actually think that he would have passed a lie detector test. This is the nature of gaslighting. Because, of course, a lie detector, a polygraph, measures your stress reaction when you know that you're lying and you're caught out. If you have no dissonance between reality and what you're saying, because what you're saying is reality, you can pass a polygraph, in my opinion, because as counter evidence mounts to what you're saying is reality and you're holding out no matter what, your reality is the reality, and the damage is horrendous. So I think for me, thinking back on that situation, the first thing I suppose is, if you're in that situation, it was one of the worst times of not just my career, but of my life. And I have to say right now that had I not had that situation, I don't think I would have had the level of empathy and understanding that I have now. Am I grateful for it? I don't know about that, but I think if I hadn't been through that, I wouldn't have understood how severe it can be. Because I would have probably thought, man, like you, come on, get a backbone, get your agency. Come on, it can't be that bad. Aren't you being a little bit of a drama queen? Trust me, I have a backbone. I have a very strong sense of agency, and I am not a drama queen. It was that bad.
Yeah.
And so, these crucible experiences of life, these crucible experiences of work, can be an opportunity for some degree of reevaluation, reinvention, redemption. Okay. Now that I hear from what Debbie's saying, now that I hear from this conversation, that I am not losing my mind. The problem is not me. This is an environment that is going to do this to me because it's being designed to do this to me. Okay. What do I do about it? How do I take the learning from this forward for the rest of my life? That is no small thing. While you're figuring that out, I suppose one of the things that's worth always remembering as well is to not let your ego trip you up. Because I suppose, similar to what you're saying, I'm not going to be on the bad side of abuse. I'm not going to get caught out by a person like this. I'm too smart. I'm too together. Guess what? Even the smartest and most together people will crumble in the face of manipulation and abuse. Like, we're not equal to it, okay? The second thing is to really try to keep as much of a record as possible. I mean, that becomes almost unsustainable at some point, because every single thing, you're spending all your time just creating a paper trail, CYAing. Well, but frankly, you're probably going to need to do that. The third thing is to start to ask for help in discreet ways. So I think one of the dangers in a toxic environment with gaslighting in particular is that you're isolated.
Yes.
And in that questioning your sanity, you feel like such a twit that because you're blaming yourself, you don't reach out for help, and you don't realize, again, hold on, this is not me. This is a pattern of behavior. What the actual, and so asking for help, recognizing that you're not in this by yourself and that this is something bigger than you, can be incredibly helpful and supportive as you're figuring this out. I think the last thing, though, and it remains my advice, having gone through this situation, because I, similarly to you, thought, no, get a coach, show up differently, make the situation better. And I certainly think there are ways I could have been more functional. I could have been less obstructive and destructive in my incredible distaste and anger for what was going on. So it just became a battle. I could have been more constructive than that, sure. But I was not fundamentally going to change this behavior. Right. This person was like this, is like this, is always going to be like this. There's a track record of 20 years across organization where he's shown up in the same way. And so I think that trap of, I need to fix myself. And yes, let's all start with ourselves. But when that starting with yourselves becomes a trap of, it's up to me to fix this, there's a problem. This trap of, I can make it better, problem. You can't. You need to get out. And that remains my opinion now, having reflected deeply on this experience, having done a lot of research, having spoken to other people who deal with corporate bullying, who have PhDs in the subject, I only, in my experience, know one situation where a toxic workplace turned around for the better, and that was a woman who was being abused at home. And so her displaced aggression was to come and to take out her powerlessness that she felt at home at work. Now that's situational. You can change that. You can help that person. When it's personality driven, when it's hardwired, this is how this person operates in the world. This is how the person gets their sense of meaning and identity from diminishing and bullying others. You know, even therapists can only make so much headway. And you as a colleague, you as a subordinate, in my opinion, in my experience, you're not going to make much headway at all.
We've got a lot of questions coming in, and I'm going to start to address them, not specifically, but in general. I just want to quickly go back to some of the points that you just made, Niven. Yes, the inevitability is that you will, if this is happening and it's impacting you, the likelihood, the inevitability is that you're probably going to need to find a different place to work at some point. But that's not always possible immediately. And a lot of people feel very trapped in their current situations. And and your confidence has been battered. And, you know, there's so much going on that an immediate, okay, well, I'm just going to go and find something else is not a practical answer for so many people. So I want to just, first of all, go back to that one point around documenting your interactions. Because first of all, if you start documenting, writing down the conversations, making a note of the words that were said, it really does help you to, when you're called into doubt, you can go back and refer to that and go, hold on a second, I wrote this down, because that's what I eventually started doing. Started writing down the words of every conversation so that I would I was so confused that I was sometimes believing, oh, maybe I didn't actually say that. So having a reference point for myself was important, but also recapping conversations on email, CCing other people. I mean, we do that in any case. I mean, that's happening as part of corporate politics in any case, as you cover your butt. But in this instance, definitely CC other people, other team members. It just makes it harder for somebody who's doing this behavior to actually for them to backpedal or outright lie if it's in writing. Although there's some I managed to do that too. Just another thing about mental health is that, and to go back to what you said, toxicity is poisonous. Make sure that you have other things going on in your life so that work doesn't become the only thing that you are busy with. You need to have a balance. You need to make sure that there's some perspective and that work isn't the be all and end all. It can be so consuming. It becomes the drama. So make sure that you have got other interests, that you are engaging with friends, that you're not alone, that you're speaking out. And yes, if you can afford it, do get a therapist or a coach, but somebody that you can talk to, not necessarily because you're going to be able to turn around the situation, but for yourself, because this becomes self-preservation until you can find a better solution for yourself. Seek out a mentor in the organization, engage with other leaders, try to navigate elsewhere if the organization is big enough. So those are just some additional practical strategies that if this is happening to you right now, start trying to figure out a more practical plan. And these are some pointers that you can use. Another question that's come up, and what I want to ask you next, is to confront or not to confront. Seems to be the question.
It depends. It really depends. So I confronted head on the person I was dealing with. And it was a very difficult situation. I'd been brought into the organization by the CEO, and so had this person. And I reported into him, and he reported into the CEO. And I knew the CEO well. I mean, we'd been at each other's homes, we'd met each other's families. So I thought I had access, and I did. And I went to the CEO to say, listen, this is what's going on. Horror, shock. 6 months later, it's still happening. 3 months later, it's still happening. And by the time I went the third time around to the CEO, I realized I'm not getting anywhere. I'm not getting anywhere because the first time I got her attention. The third time, there'd been all kinds of muddying the waters with this bloke who had, this manager who had more access, who had more time. So I thought, had equal access. We didn't. He was more senior. In the end, he had more access, in his version of the narrative, started to become the dominant one, and I started to become the problem child. And frankly, I was a problem child because I was so angry and so disgusted at what I was seeing that I would go into meetings just waiting to attack, just waiting to count. And I mean, that's a race to the bottom. It really is. It's a race to the bottom in terms of your own bandwidth, in terms of people's support, because you actually start to become a bit of a leper. You are so angry, you are so confrontational that people don't want to be associated with you. And I mean, I say this with such regret and such sadness at the things I didn't know, and the things that motivated me in terms of this righteous rage that I was feeling at what was going on and what was being meted out to other people and to the organization and the destruction. And this need to address it, that really just ended up making the situation for everyone, including people who would have liked to support me, worse. And in the end, I wasn't believed by the CEO, who I thought would have had my back. It was such an awful situation, Debbie. And so, I think head-on confronting, unless it's the last stand and you're not going to say what you need to say before you go, can be incredibly destructive. And will take all kinds of tolls on you. But, when you get to the point where so far no further and you say your truth and then you speak your truth to that power and you leave, well, that can be quite cathartic as well. Somewhere in the middle is the emotional detachment that you speak about. How do I see this situation? How do I see this behavior? How do I detach myself from it emotionally, intellectually, and try to see what's going on? How do I see where this person might be coming from? And there's this fantastic book I read a while ago called The 5 Mind Traps of Complexity. And one of the traps in the face of complexity, and heaven knows toxic behavior is complex, one of the mind traps that we have is single stories, simple stories. I certainly had that. I'm right, they're wrong. I'm good, they're bad. I'm on the side of the organization, they're just a psychopath. There were elements of truth in this, but it wasn't the whole story. And so one of the things to try to move yourself away from single, simple stories is to ask yourself, how is this person a hero in their story? How is this person a hero in their story? Which, hear me loud and clear, is not the same as condoning what they do. I mean, I can never condone what this character did. But had I had some degree of curiosity to understand what's driving them. And narcissists, it's about adulation. Psychopaths, it's about achievement. Machiavellianism, it's about their own agenda as well. What's driving?
Won't you say that again? Because I think that is very, those are really clear distinctions. And for so many people, it's like, why is this happening? How does this happen? So say that again.
Yeah. So narcissists, they want affirmation. They want adulation. They want recognition. And I mean, some of the research that I've done into this says, the level of narcissism is directly proportional to the level of shame. And so it seems completely counterintuitive. This person who cannot get enough of themselves and their own achievements and needs to tell everybody about it. And their flipping ego enters the room 2 seconds before they do. It's almost always directly proportional to the degree of inadequacy and shame that they actually feel. Now, it takes a degree of maturity and curiosity and empathy and emotional intelligence to try to dig beneath the narcissism to find that shame. But it's almost inevitably always there, hidden under layers of self-aggrandizement, but almost inevitably there. Agreed. The psychopaths, I mean, there's a need to get their own way and to be ruthless in how they achieve things. That can be incredibly difficult to deal with, but you can actually see it more easily. The Machiavellianism is the hard one to put on, to put your finger on. Because like I said, the narcissist, me, the psychopaths, so outrageous their behavior, you can actually see it. But the Machiavellian, they're behind the scenes. They make things happen. The word that most often gets associated with high max is cunning. Cunning is almost not just a means to an end, it's an end in itself. You know, I'm the person who pulls the strings. I'm the person who makes things happen and no one sees me coming. And so why are they needing to do this? Again, without condoning, without therapizing, without trying to cure this person, can I, while I need to cope with it, if I have to cope with it, can I try to find a bridge between behavior that is abhorrent, that is abusive, and myself, and try to find a way to function in that for as long as I need to, until I can.
There have been a number of questions with certain people who are just sharing some of their experiences and having tried to address this issue internally, having tried to speak up to HR, address the situation with other senior leaders, not being heard, being told that they're overreacting, being told once again that it's, there's like been no validation of their issues, their concerns. And so eventually they're just staying quiet or making themselves small in this environment. What would you say to people who are just surviving and who've already tried some things internally, but can see that there's no organizational support for their assertions?
Yeah, so let me re-emphasize what people might have tried and failed at. And HR, and I'd love it if there are HR people on the webinar to give their perspective. But I had a conversation with a few weeks ago with a woman, very senior woman, who said she cannot believe what she put up with for years. And she went to HR to say what was going on. Finally, this person was removed. HR wouldn't do anything until he was removed. And then he was removed through other processes. And she said, and the HR person came up to her and actually apologized. And she said, I know what you went through. I could see it, but I was too scared and too institutionally isolated to do anything either. And so you looked to me for help. I couldn't give it, and I didn't give it. I have to apologize, which is some consolation, but very little, because you're already isolated and now you're more isolated. I think, I think the advice that you've given, the practical steps that you've given, Debbie, are so valuable. And so I can only reinforce them. Get the help that you can where you can. And it's unlikely to be at work, okay? First of all, because no matter how toxic your boss is, nobody responds well to somebody criticizing their boss. The best thing you can do is to try to stay professional in the face of it, which is much easier said than done. But learn from my lessons. I was not professional because I was so angry. Try to get the help that you can where you can, and understand that that help is probably not going to come from work. Maybe one day, if there's a big enough groundswell, if there's enough people talking about the same things, somebody does get removed, but that's the exception rather than the norm. Try to find things that are outside of something that is all consuming, because this will take up your bandwidth. I mean, I had my partner say to me, you need to leave because there's 3 of us in this marriage. You come home every day so angry and disgusted at what's going on. It's all I hear about. It's all you can talk about. It's all that you can think about. That was not healthy. It was not sustainable. And I think the third thing is what David Rock is a neuroscientist. He talks about the 5 levels of focus. And we all need and all have the 5 levels of focus. So the first level of focus is the situation, the problem at hand. When you drop your level of focus, as we sometimes need to, you drop it into the details, and then you drop it further into the drama. When you lift your level of focus, you're lifting up to the plan. You lift it further, you lift it up to the vision. So really, what is the vision for your life? What is the vision for your career? What is the plan in the situation that you can cling to? Is an incredibly important coping mechanism, because it is so easy. It's almost impossible to resist getting sucked into the details and the drama, because they are so corrosive. Try to avoid that as much as you can. And like I say, simple, easy, not the same thing. but focusing on, okay, I'm giving myself 3 months, I'm giving myself 6 months. This is what I'm going to do next year. I think most things are manageable in my experience when they're fine. So what is the timeline that you're giving yourself for the situation to turn around, or for you to start making alternative plans, or for you to leave? Have those timelines, hold yourself to it, look at the plan and the vision for yourself in your life, and know that, you know, this too shall pass. And hopefully you come out of it with lessons that stand you in good stead, as opposed to in a million pieces.
I was doing some research on that question, to confront or not to confront, and the sort of the red warning bells was only with extreme caution. And what I'm seeing just from the comments and the questions that have been coming through is how many times people have tried to address it, and just it's just the defeatist experience of not being heard, of not being believed. And of ultimately having to be the one to apologize, or feeling like they did something wrong, is just further, further salt to the wound. I just want to, we've spoken about this, we've peppered this in, but if you're in any doubt as to, if you know that this is happening to you, or the impact is severe. It really is severe. And that's why we're saying, if this is having an emotional and also physical impact on you, don't take this lightly. This is not something to be taken lightly. Start forming a plan, because this is not healthy at all. And we've spoken about the people are here on this chat, this Q&A, are talking about real PTSD. So studies have shown that that people get physically sick. There's higher risk of cardiovascular disease, stroke, diabetes for people who work for toxic bosses. I mean, that's what the data is showing us. Aside from the lasting scars and wounds, people are more susceptible to depression, anxiety. I mean, I was having panic attacks. I had never had panic attacks in my life. I mean, yes, I'm generally kind of anxious around things. I'm a mom, but panic attacks, that wasn't me. That started happening. I could not recognize myself. I'm like, who is this person? What the hell happened here? And it takes time to recover. And unfortunately, it does impact your whole life. It does. It can't just be cornered. It can't just be defined to work. A question that's been arising, and I feel I should take accountability or responsibility for this one, is how do you identify this in the recruiting process? So how is it?
How do you, Debbie? Please give us some answers on this one.
Honestly, people with these tendencies are going to come across extremely well in an interview. They are so good at talking about their achievements, and they're so convincing. And they also pepper in a little bit of false humility. And they are going to shine in an interview. They're going to win in an interview. And so don't blame yourself if you've been somebody who recruited somebody who turned out to be a toxic person. It's super hard to identify. Honestly, in my world, because we're doing this all the time, and I apologize if I have been responsible for placing narcissistic, toxic people. I'm pretty sure I may have. They're really difficult to figure out. You have to do references, and not just the references of the ones that they give you. They're going to have their key people, but if you do references and you do make sure it's somebody who was reporting at a stakeholder level. There's a question that I ask when I'm doing references, because sometimes people are scared to say anything specific that might be detrimental to a person. They're very edgy about what can I say if I'm giving a reference. There's a question that I ask that you can ask. Is there anything that I should be aware of that would impact my decision to hire this person? Is there anything I should know about? You don't have to be specific about it. But if you could just give me, is there anything lurking there that I should be aware of? And you may get a heads up that there's something worth digging. But guys, if you have recruit, if you're thinking to yourself, how did this guy or woman end up in my organization? Surely they should have seen it. It's hard to spot, and it's hard to address. And because it doesn't get addressed, it often means that there are many of these people lurking. Hopefully, as we all start to speak more about this, as we all start to become more aware of what the behaviors are, more of us will be able to corral the ones who are the perpetrators of this, and possibly eventually be able to do something about it. Obviously, organizations that have got really healthy culture, those people will be rooted out. And so it's another a reason to ensure that we really are talking about, that we are emphasizing culture, that we are talking about what does good leadership look like. I was hoping to, before we end, run the poll again, because we've had quite a number more people join this conversation. So we'll just quickly do the poll again. If you could let us know if you've been directly impacted, or if you're just here out of interest. Advaitha, are you able to run that poll? Okay, here we go. While you're filling this out, there are a few questions. While you're filling this out, we're going to be sending to all of you who joined, and also people who registered but weren't able to join, some resources. We've mentioned Snakes in Suits. That's a really good book to read. There's also another book. If you're experiencing this potentially in your personal life, it's called Stop Walking on Eggshells, and it talks about narcissistic personality disorder and borderline personality disorder, which we haven't really addressed here. It is once again groundbreaking, very, very important book. There's a TED Talk, Narcissism and Its Discontents. Niven, you mentioned another resource as well.
Yes, The 5 Mind Traps of Complexity by Jennifer Garvey-Berger. It's fabulous. Okay. It conceals this, but it has application to this.
All right. So once again, goodness, it's heartbreaking. 73% of the people here say that they have been directly impacted by a toxic workplace. I hope that this has been helpful. I hope that this has been empowering in some way. I feel in some way we haven't necessarily given too many answers on what to do or how to address this effectively internally. I think because experience shows that that's a really hard thing to do. But what I was hoping mostly for is to give listeners an opportunity to really start identifying what is and what isn't. And then if you're being directly impacted, how do you deal with this internally? It's heartbreaking to me that so many people are experiencing this potentially on a daily basis. If you take back your power because you can identify it, I think we've had a little bit of a win here today. So we're at 29 minutes past the hour. I do like to run a tight ship. We weren't able to address all the questions. Feel free to connect with Niven. We'll be sent, you can, on your website address is nivenpostma.com.
Yeah, or LinkedIn. LinkedIn's great.
And Niven will be reactivating her LinkedIn engagement in 2 weeks' time. She did send a notice out to say, don't expect to hear from her. She's busy for the next week or so. And you will all be receiving a post-webinar emailer with all the resources. Thank you for being here. Please stay safe and do what you need to do for yourselves, and have a very good, wonderful rest of the day. Bye now.